I am here with mystery, but hopefully he won't be for much longer. I am pleased to be joined by the great, the wonderful Bob Ebeling, one half of Jext Telez and entirely himself. I first found out indirectly about this man. I hope this sounds good. I first found out indirectly about this man about a year ago. I would go on Guitar Center's used section because they always undercut reverb with their pricing. And whether or not I wanted to buy the thing, I would look it up and just listen to it online just so I can learn, educate myself. And I happened upon the Jext Telez White Pedal version 2. I listened to it and it stood out like nothing stood out before. Swooped in, got it, started playing with the thing, and making a documentary about my buddy Lee, and it just perfect interstitial. It dials in such beautiful tone. I got in touch with you, and we've kind of loosely been in touch ever since. I know you haven't spoken yet, and there's that Benjamin Franklin quote misattributed to the Bible. Maybe you can kind of borrow different proverbs, where he says, "Even a fool is thought wise until he opens up his mouth and removes all doubt." And I know you haven't spoken yet, but there's that Latin phrase, res loquitur ipsa, I think, which is used by a lot of doctors. It means the thing speaks for itself. Like if a doctor operates on you and leaves a scalpel inside and you take him over to sue him for leaving a scalpel on your abdomen, you'd say res loquitur ipsa. The thing speaks for itself. I don't need to put any more evidence. Look at my abdomen. There's a scalpel in my abdomen. And I'm saying you don't even need to open up your mouth. Your work speaks for itself. That being said, how are you doing today, sir? Good to see you. Good to meet you. So rumor has it you were born at a young age. You're as old as your tongue. You're a little bit older than your teeth. But what else should people know about you?
I decided to become a musician when I was 6. And everything I've ever done is in the quest of perfecting that. So, it's like, what is that? 46 years now on the quest of going after just wanting to record music.
It takes 10 years, 10,000 hours, so to speak, Malcolm Gladwell claims, to master a thing. 46 years, are you more than 4 times the master of something having to do with music, at least at this point?
It could be, and because there's a lot of things that I've had to get good at. When I was young, I started on drums, and then I started into recording and playing the guitar, and synthesizers and vocals and just arranging music and writing music. And then in the studio, there's a lot of things that you have to get good at or master to the degree that you want to master them. So, miking things and multi-track recording, and then editing, and then mixing, and then, going over the whole thing again.
So the term, in the military, sadly, wars and rumors of wars, we might be headed into WW3, the one that Albert Einstein said would be followed up by a war with sticks and stones, no matter how this one's going to be fought. The term general, which, on both sides, no matter what side this next war is going to be, you're going to have, is short for generalist. And originally, a general was a guy who started at the bottom of the military ranks and had every position all the way to the top, so that when he's at the top, he knows exactly when he's like, this troop goes over here and these guys go over there. He knows what their job is, not just the strategic value of it. So it sounds like in an audio sense, you're a generalist. You sort of have worn every hat from the bottom to the top. Is there any hat that you've yet to wear in the music world?
I don't know. I can't think negatively.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. That's a positive quality, you know, of a long life. A lot of old people in your lineage, people live a long time.
Yeah.
Positive thinking. That's good.
Yeah.
So does that mean, let's just stay on that, is your music upbeat, or how would you describe the mood of your music?
I guess it would be spacey is probably the first word.
Look at the room we're in. Of course, the first place you think of, yeah. And I should say, people might describe themselves, and they might even be right about what they say, but it's another thing entirely the quality of, objective quality of what they're talking about. And in terms of quality echo, you certainly picked an ideal spot for displaying the spacey sound. A good space for space.
Yeah. Well, I've recorded songs in this silo and did a lot of work in here in the last couple of years. So I figured it would be a good location.
Recorded songs that actually made it to record?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Stuff that's on several different records was done in here.
Man.
I would bring, some fancy mics and set up in here and record.
Man. How old do you think this I'm not sure how we're going to refer to this place, this abandoned location is? 50 years.
At least. This silo was probably put up in the 50s, but, I mean, it's possible it was earlier, but I asked my dad about that, and
wow.
He kind of estimated it into the 50s. So 75, 80 years.
Man.
And it's possible it was put up in the 60s, so I don't know. But it is an impressive silo.
Oh yeah, it's not metal. You see all those videos of the ones collapsing, I guess they have to after a while when they get so old, but this one's built to last. I think of 100 years ago, Whittaker Chambers. I think I told you we had lunch one time. If you buy a property and you find on that property some fence that you weren't aware of before, first find out why was it put there in the first place, and then by all means, it's your property, take it down. But the idea of when you find something that's been here before you were here and you're not sure why it's there, first learn about it before putting it down or even destroying it. Certainly this is an abandoned place that people might be on one side or the other, but you found use in this space.
Yeah.
And thus and so, Jext Telez, you take cherished sounds that never, how do you say it? They were perfect for their time, and people moved on because, sort of like we're post-industrial age. The best of history is ahead of us, so we always think whatever comes out next must be better than whatever came out before. And so maybe some of that may have plagued, or for better or worse, affected music in the 20th century with new models, new gadgets and gizmos coming out, always replacing the old ones. And with your work, you've taken a lot of these cherished items of the past and brought them back, recognizing their value that they had all along, that they never last. It's just that other things came around. What is your relationship with the past?
My relationship with the past.
That's a terrible worded question. How do you? Clearly, you value the past with the work that you do. Otherwise,
yeah. Well, in audio, a lot of the peak of the design of audio gear was in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So in the 80s, everything started to get really kind of using microchips and IC chips, and it didn't have the sound of the golden age of tubes and transistors. So yeah, I found that the sound of a guitar or a microphone preamp, any piece of gear, the sound is what inspires the performance. And therefore I became quite obsessed, as many people do, with vintage gear.
I'm going to turn this from color to light. I think that might look better. Oh, this is a question that reveals the most about a person in the least amount of time. Is mankind inherently good?
Yeah, I mean, I live with that belief that it is, yeah.
Because everything follows from that perspective, from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't think it was, it would be kind of pointless.
Like, what are you doing? It's art. You know, what's the point of art if your view on humanity is a low one?
Right.
You're seeking a greater, an elevated, a higher state of being, even if, for a moment, vicariously through what you're listening, experiencing one way or the other.
Yeah.
As a designer, is it good to learn from the mistakes of others before you make your own apparatus? What pitfalls did you observe in others that you were blessed to be able to avoid in your own work?
I mean, with fuzz pedals, I just think that some of them look cool and a lot of them don't look cool. So I'm just trying to make it look, cool. Basically, make it not look cheesy.
Yeah. You eat, in culinary school, you eat with your eyes first. They always told us that, like, it doesn't matter if you make the best dish, if it looks ugly on the plate, no one wants to eat it.
Yeah.
So you think about that plate before you think about the taste.
Sure.
Our increasingly digital world encourages sedentary lifestyles while discouraging exploring the physical world, which drains demand for maintenance of our physical infrastructure, which results in a crumbling world increasingly harder to repair, both due to increased damage over time, unchecked entropy, and decreased knowledge in repairing damage over time. We sent man to the moon using slide rulers to build our rocket ships, and yet we are less capable now than half a century ago due to our dearth in folks interested in the physical world of building and fixing things. You build things. I don't know if you fix things too. Does your building things at all relate to your lack of a sedentary lifestyle, to your healthy abundance of activity in the real world?
Let me think about that. Oh wait, can you re-ask?
So I'm positing. I could be wrong, but I think a study just this week. I think it was about girls, but I think it would apply to boys too. They said natural cure for ADHD: exercise. I mean, it's common sense. Boys are wiry and want to run around and play, and girls they're better at studying, so girls do better in school than boys because we want to do this, want to do that. Do you think that? I attribute this digital world. Sit at home, look at your screen. Everything's kind of served up on a platter for you, and you don't go out and do things, build things, make things anymore, fix things. And it seems like you sort of live an active life. I could be wrong. You walk around, you get out, you do things. Does that correspond with your life as a builder, as a creator, as a maker of things?
I mean, every day to me is just trying to do one thing, and if I am not super creatively motivated on a given day, then I've started to find that, get out to the woods and take a walk, and that will increase your motivation for the rest of the day. But I'm not an exercise fanatic, for sure. I've spent a lot of time just laying around waiting for that motivation to come.
Well, what was it? Mozart said that that guy, said that his best ideas came when he was about to fall asleep, like when he's in that kind of between sleeping and waking.
Twilight.
Sort of like Edison with you remember the metal ball? You know what I'm talking about? The ball bearings?
No.
Edison would sit on a chair with a metal plate or metal whatever board on the ground with two steel ball bearings in his hand, and sit until he was just about to fall asleep, where he'd drop the balls and wake him up, and then he'd get all his ideas. He would literally do that for hours to ruminate.
It's a good technique. My technique is usually the shower. Or for some reason, whenever I get in the shower, that's when the best idea of the day will come. So there has been times when I'm in the middle of a session in the studio or something, and I'm just like, okay, I have to take a break and go take a shower. And then, like, the melody I'm searching for will come to me in the shower.
Oh wait, you're the space rock guy, so the echo in the shower.
Something.
Maybe, who knows?
I always attribute it to the water. That water has some kind of special powers.
Interesting.
So I'll like communicate with the water a little bit, just tell it to like heal me while I'm in the shower.
Is it not that you would, but is it the warmth as well?
Yeah, it's probably the comfort where some of your little aches and pains dissolve, and then you don't have your cell phone in your hand, and yeah, I don't know what it is, but just getting in there seems to clear everything up and bring the solution quickly.
Yeah, for me, it's sleeping. I can't tell you how many times I'll be stuck on being able to play a song, or like you said, a melody, and I wake up and it's there. The Beatles were like that too.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney famously with Yesterday.
Yeah.
And then speaking of ruminating, the miracle year 1905 or 1906, I think it was 1905, Albert Einstein, clerk at a train station, gets his work done. He's Albert Einstein, gets his work done early, of course. So he sits and ruminates, thought experiment. There's some German phrase, I can't think of it, but it literally translates to sit and think. It's actually kind of in German culture that he took that from and obviously went far with it. That's where he came up with E equals MC squared. Not when he's a fancy, overpaid professor, no, when he's an underpaid clerk at a train station. So there's power to daydreaming, there's power to, like you said, walk away, clear your mind.
Yeah, and power naps.
Yes.
I always take naps. That's usually like once a day at least. And there is something about just getting comfortable and clearing my mind, you know. So I'll very often just go take a power nap. And if I can just get to that point where you're drifting, like it doesn't have to actually be sleep that happens, but as long as it gets to that place where your mind blanks out for a second, then I'll feel refreshed and ready to get back to something.
You know, talking of creativity and kind of working the system to make it, you know, things function the best for you, almost sounds like there's an extra entity or force involved outside of ourselves, or even within ourselves that's apart from us that we have to deal with or make a deal with, almost, you know, work with and work around.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
No, that I agree.
No, what I'm about to say, I've got a stupid thing to say.
No, like a year ago or something, I was running around and out here every day in this silo and going through a really intense creative phase. And I remember kind of negotiating with whatever the other powers is, that's saying, you know, you can do whatever you want to me as long as I can continue to create like this. Like, take me out in the woods and scare the shit out of me. As long as I can keep making records and recording music, then I'll let you, you know, drop any bomb you want on me.
Amen. If an EMP struck, if an electrical magnetic pulse struck, would your pedals be less damaged on account of their vintage transistors?
I don't know how those affect. I don't know how those affect transistors. It's possible that they might.
I was gonna say, someone needs to invent a transistor made out of cockroaches, because that'd be the only thing that would survive, you know, WW3. Okay, so I wanted to have a surprise where I made, gave you, because my joke was, even if everything screwed up from today, at least you can walk home with a prism, and because you could use that in your own life. I'll still try to do it one day. But here's my other surprise for you today. What's the phrase, like stump the scholar or stump the teacher? I'm trying to stump you, the expert here.
All right.
Okay. So you made the dizzy tone, which is based off of the Elka dizzy tone, which is based off the Baldwin Burns buzz around.
Yeah.
Which some people, as of 2021, so this is actually the recent news, think the buzz around might be based off a yet earlier pedal.
That's possible.
Do you know about the GP Electronics harmonic generator?
No.
All right. I'm gonna give this my gift to you. That's it. That's literally the only thing on the internet.
Oh, wow.
Doesn't it look just like? And
Yeah.
apparently it was a British guy made that like literally like a month or two before the buzz around. And he was like in a small town, and he goes up to Bristol, wherever the big town was, like, those blimmin' bloody, whatever his English swear words were, they took my design. And he was like, whatever, I'll come up with something else, but he's cool about it ultimately.
Yeah.
But that's
That definitely looks like they based the dizzy tone on that.
Yeah.
It's got the same triangle of the knobs. Yeah,
So-
that looks like... I mean, a lot of things at that time were being made in Italy.
Interesting.
So if they designed it in England and then somebody took it to Italy and said, we need to make these, then it's like how Chinese products these days pop out of whatever we had them make, and then all of a sudden there's products that are cheaper or whatever that are the same thing.
Even couture, I heard like I don't want to name brands, but like Gucci, I think Gucci or some of those guys, they'll have like all the pieces made in China, and then it'll be assembled, like sewn together in Italy, so they can still put made in Italy according to their laws.
Right. Well, yeah, I think in the 60s, Italy was like the equivalent of China.
Really?
Yeah, well, a lot of synths and fuzz pedals were made in Italy.
I think of spaghetti westerns. I wonder if that was a similar thing with.
It was in that era, yeah.
Okay, here's. I'm speaking of stumping the scholar, stumping the guy. I got an impossible question for you, because why not?
Did you ever read those My Struggle books by that dude from the Netherlands?
Man's Ultimate Search for Meaning?
No. It's a set of books by Karl Ove Newsgaard.
Karl Ove Newsgaard.
Yeah.
My Struggle books.
Yeah.
What are they about?
He's like doing like the Proust thing.
Oh.
And just writes about his life in like the most boring way possible, but it's like 6 books that are like total of a couple thousand pages. It's very, very addictive.
I am vehemently against the metric system, except for scientists that want, quicker conversions, because the imperial system is based off of humans, while the metric system is based off of the Earth and the number 10. The imperial system has a foot, your foot, or a cup, which is, you drink out of. Fanny Farmer, about 100 years ago, standardized measurements in cooking. And why am I trying to say this? Why is a germanium transistor not bigger or smaller? Why is a germanium transistor not the size of an amp tube? Or why is an amp tube not the size of a germanium transistor? What would a germanium transistor the size of an amp tube sound like? Perhaps it would require too much power to be safe to use, but why are things the size that they are, basically?
I have no idea.
Just curious. Like I said, impossible question here. If I was to invite guitar nerds to compete in a competition, I would tell them, brainiacs, bring your axe. What makes a good and bad guitar nerd? Where should one draw the line between learning and doing? And a caveat, some of the greatest film directors were shut-ins as children and used their not being able to do to become the best doers later on.
Is there a question there?
Where do you draw the line between being too much of a guitar nerd and just kind of like staring at your navel and never actually making music, and actually going and being the tip of the spear in the art world?
Yeah. Well, that's like part of the process, I think. When you're in your bedroom for 8 years trying to learn every Rush record on the drums, like, I'm sure somebody older and wiser could have pointed at me and said I was, being a drum nerd, and of course I was. But then when you get out into the actually making your own music, then you have a whole process of defining yourself with those are like your chops that just kind of come out of you. So the nerd part is an important part that's kind of filling in what's the technique that's going to come out of you in the future. Part of the technique.
But then there's the other thing. I grew up. My brother played music, and I'd always get on his case when he'd learn covers instead of writing original music. I'd say, dude, you're just becoming good at other people's stuff. Keep working on yourself. But later on, I found I grew so much as a musician when I started teaching other people how to play music, and the quickest way is to learn a bunch of other songs. Mm-hmm. And I grew as a musician the most, I feel like, then. So there's that as well.
Yeah, like working on other people's records in the studio, you're learning all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't learn just trying to work on your own material, because you're blasting through a lot more stuff and getting practiced up at identifying structures and arrangements and making little notes in your head like, oh, I like that, and then you kind of lift that idea for something of your own later on. So yeah, you can't do it in a vacuum. So that's all good input if your intent is to do your own thing later on.
It sounds like you compare being an engineer to being a teacher, not just a student. Not just that you shape the instruments, the inanimate objects that you use to make music, but even the people themselves.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways to look at that. I don't know if it's teaching, but even though you are, because usually when people come into the recording studio, they're just trying to figure it out, and so yeah, maybe they're learning by watching you. But usually, with the way budgets and everything works, you're just trying to get the job done, because usually you don't have enough time to do it. And I was probably impatient with people that were trying to learn while we were working. Probably didn't have the right amount of patience, because it's like, I'm not a big talker, I'm more of a doer. And in the studio, when you're trying to get like half a record done in 2 days, you have to keep moving.
You don't have time to think about what you did. Is there instinct then involved? Not just experience, but like what goes beyond what experience could inform? You're moving so fast.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's very instinctual. You have to constantly go with your gut, and then if somebody else's gut doesn't agree with your gut, then you have to quickly get to the point of where you can both be happy with what's happening.
Yeah. And then is there 46 years in music, I'm not sure how many years you would say you've been doing recording, or there are different levels of that too. It's a complicated answer, but in all your time recording,
27 years in recording.
27 years. So half the time you've been in music, you've been recording. It's almost like a photographer on which side of the camera are you on, which side of the control desk are you on. Sometimes both. I guess with wireless or something. But
Yeah. Well, I started recording when I was 23, like my own material, actually 21, but that was like 4-tracking in the bedroom. But the first time I was in a recording studio, I was 23, like a proper recording studio, 22 or 23, and yeah, you're just starting to learn at that point that, yeah, this is where I need to be living. But you're like young and broke and clueless, and you just have to get there however you need to get there. These days it's so easy because $500 you can have a Pro Tools system anywhere you want for a couple grand. But back then, before computers were being used and before all this stuff, when it was just analog, it wasn't so easy to have like a 24-track recorder and a big mixing console and all that stuff. So there was a lot more struggle to do it just 25 years back. Whereas now, it's like completely dislocated from what it used to be. There was a bigger learning curve back then, and that's not to say the learning curve disappeared, but the rule book's out the window.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I don't want brrr to happen in your face. Back to my affinity for imperial over metric, for measure by the human, not by the. And that's the other thing. When they measured by like an even amount of meters around the Earth, they come to find out it wasn't accurate after all. But they're not about to change the meter now. But speaking of how you measure things, if I could just remember what I was going to say, pacing. Well, I'll ask this. We talked about instinct. Is there anything to do with the pacing of making a record? Like if you were able to really throw yourself into an album and kind of like have all your wants met, do you think that because you're so used to working fast that it's hard to actually, it's hard to have everything you want at times?
Well, I'm spoiled now, and I don't work fast anymore either. But I mean, when it's like you have $1,000 and a band wants to record a record, then that's a whole different thing than when you already own everything you need to make your record and it's already set up in your basement and you have all the time in the world to think through what do you want to record.
Yeah.
So these days, I mean, I don't work on other people's records anymore. So I'm strictly, stuck in my own head, working on my own material, and that's all I work on. And the creative process is major expansion. Everything is slower, and you can wait for that inspiration all you want. Like I was recording drums 2 weeks ago, and then I finished, and the drum set just stayed up for 2 weeks while I started to think about doing vocals. But I didn't work for 2 weeks. I was just like kind of stuck in the thinking about doing vocals thing, which I finally, somebody asked to borrow some cymbals, which motivated me to tear the drum set down finally, and then that motivated me to say, oh well, now that drum set's out of the way, I can start on vocals. And I actually started last night messing around with some vocals. But if they hadn't asked to borrow cymbals, I could still be just waiting for the next move, So yeah, it's a lot slower process now, but it's also way far down the road of like I'm working on material deep inside my brain, and I'm not gonna jump if it's not like if it doesn't feel like it's time to jump. Whereas if you're recording a band for $1,000 and you finish the drums, you got to tear them out of there and get the vocals going in the next hour. Doesn't matter if you feel motivated or not. So yeah, two different, wildly different things.
How did you choose which pedal to make next, or device apparatus? And how did you choose the names of your pedals? Is there a through line connecting the names of your pedals to each other?
No, just trying to come up with the right, cool name. But as far as choosing which ones to do, I was analyzing like what's out there, what do people know about, what do people not know about, and if I can find something that's cool and deserves to be out there a little more, then I'll take it on. So it was really the whole fuzz pedal thing started because I really just had one fuzz pedal for most of my life, and then I wanted to explore those more. And when I went to look at and start exploring fuzz pedals, I saw, man, there's about 20 different archetypes, and then there's about 400 different versions of these 20 different archetypes, and they all have a different sound, and it just seemed overwhelming, like, how am I going to figure out which 3 or 4 I really dig? And so I came up with an idea of just buying and selling fuzz pedals so that I would have 5 minutes to check each one out before I put it back up for sale after buying it. And then that rolled over into actually making some of them when I started to see that, there's a little hole in the marketplace here.
Certainly, and boy, did you fill it. In fact, I would say not only did you fill the hole, that there's a little mound. you left a little, I don't know, jargon word for that would be, low.
Yeah. Burial mound.
Yes, that people wonder, like, what is that? You fly over the plane,
yeah,
in some shape. It's so stupid. Transistors have dialing to high, low, or mid, or whatever they have. Just like people, right? How are people and transistors alike? And what kind of transistor would you be? And which model, make, and year? And having answered that question, where would you place yourself? What pedal would you go into? Sort of like a takeoff Barbara Walters, what kind of tree would you be? That famous question of Hepburn.
Yeah, well, I mean, the germanium transistors, when you measure them up, you kind of end up with a pile of lower gain, a pile of the ideal gain, and the pile of high gain. So, yeah, I mean, people could be put into that sort of pile, low energy, just right, and too much. I would definitely be in the low energy pile. Just like at the speed and pace that I like to move. And then as far as one individual pedal, one particular type of pedal that I could exist inside of, I guess it would be the Montarbo synth. I can't even say what it's called, and I haven't made them either. It's just an Italian, kind of related to the Big Muff, but it's like missing some of the stuff that makes the Big Muff sound kind of distortion-y. It's really scooped sounding. It's got a lot of high and a lot of low, and it's almost totally missing the mid-range. So it's I don't know, that's the one that I use a lot. The Montarbo synth. Why can't I remember that? I gotta look that up.
Now, would that be the same one you said you were a one fuzz man for a long time? You danced with the one that brung you for years and years. What was that the same fuzz?
That was a Fox fuzz wah. My original fuzz pedal, and that's still one of the great fuzzes. Just any of the Fox, they have one that's called like a tone something, but it's the same fuzz that's in the Fox fuzz wahs.
Yeah,
that's a pretty easy fuzz to get along with. It's called the Montarbo Synphoton. The Montarbo Synphoton.
Montaro Synphoton.
Montarbo Synphoton. Sinfhoton. That's one right there. It's kind of big muff, but it's tighter than a big muff. Big muffs are kind of loose and have a lot of mid-range. So the Synphoton is like taking out all that mid-range. But you could dial that same sound up pretty close with a Fox fuzz wah.
Now, speaking of the distortion, the power, the energy, like the sound of different fuzzes. You can get very granular with your ear for sound, and I think Ecclesiastes chapter 12, Koheleth, the preacher, perhaps Solomon speaking, and he said, the sound of the grinding gets low. As we get older, we lose our hearing. How is that something that you're facing as you approach later years in your life, and how does that affect what you do?
Hearing loss?
Yeah.
So far, there's something freaky going on where I just keep getting better hearing.
What?
And I mean, maybe it's because of my own kind of refusal to play out live and tour. Like the few times that I did do that, where once I was Kid Rock's drummer for a little while, and we played like a couple weeks, and one of my ears started doing a siren for like 5 days, and that's when I really was like, I'm leaving this position. Like, my hearing's more important than any of this garbage. And so I don't know if it's because I've protected it or I haven't stood on a stage with 100-watt Marshalls in front of me for many years, but like, knock on wood, my hearing seems fantastic. And I do listen loud. Like in the studio, I crank the monitors. But I'm very sensitive to when my hearing gets that cotton down kind of thing. When you're cranking music for half an hour, like if you stop it and then just go sit somewhere quietly, like you can tell when your hearing has been like the top end's gone away and it's muffled. And I get almost angry when I have that sensation.
Oh, man.
So I try to stay away from that,
Now, I'd love to hear what you think, but I've heard, because I'm one of those weirdos always like glancing at studies, that they say that you could work 8 hours with the sound of like a blender, basically like work at Starbucks without getting permanent hearing loss. Do you think that you keep within that sound of a blender kind of level and amount of time with your work?
I think I keep it to like an hour or less of loud volume every day.
Yeah.
Usually when I'm driving in my car, I have it turned all the way up and it's loud, and like on some days I'll notice, I can feel this is not great. But most of the time, like, I can take it and then I don't have to feel like my hearing's shut down afterwards. But yeah, any situation that my hearing starts to get muffled out, I avoid those situations, which includes like jamming with guys, any playing of drums at all, which is why I do it so little.
You ever try Heroes? I love those.
I did used to use those when I was a kid, and it just takes all the joy out of everything.
No, but I swear, like, 'cause they make those plastic ones that you kind of twist it in, and then someone can like whisper and you could still hear it. I don't know if you.
Oh yeah, because there's like a little hole through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a pair of those too, but there's something oversensitive in my ears that just the fact of something is jammed in your ear just takes like all the use of doing whatever we're doing out of it. So I've always been not into ear protection just because it instantly makes me think this is stupid. Like if I'm at a concert and it's too loud, I'm leaving. Yeah, so I don't like ear protection, but I don't think people should try to damage their ears, you know. My dad has like bad hearing loss from running a saw, cutting brick and block with a big mortar saw.
Oh, man.
And so yeah, he suffers like daily from that because there's like, you know, like one frequency that's just constantly ringing. But he also has really sensitive hearing. Like if the TV's on, even just a little bit above really low, like he'll get complaining about it. So he has that, like, he likes everything very quiet and low in volume. But that seems almost unrelated to the damage that he did to his ears back in the day, doing brick and block cuts.
I think it might have to do with differentiating dynamics. You know, when kind of like everything becomes like one sound and
yeah, well that's and I've noticed that same phenomenon in him, that I have the same phenomenon, that I can't listen to two things at once. Like if the TV's on and there's people talking in the other room, it's just like, forget it. Just turn the TV off, because like, and also in social situations, if it's like at a concert and people want to talk to you, like that's one of my worst pet peeves, is like, no matter how loud you scream in my ear right now, like there's two things going on and I can't concentrate on your words, let alone the fact that you have to scream them at me now. So, but that goes right down to simple conversation, you know, like if you're being interrupted by the blender in the coffee shop, like it actually has the power to just shut my thinking down. Like I give up. There's something in my brain that goes, okay, I quit thinking, because I'm not going to try to discern two different sounds right now.
Yeah. You're good at throwing yourself into something, a unitasker.
Never too much input at once. I can take one simple input at a time.
Speaking of inputs, why do pedal input and outputs go right to left instead of left to right? Aboriginal Central Americans invented the wheel as a toy for kids, but not as a tool for adults in industry. Mm-hmm. Do you suppose that in the realm of guitar pedals, or guitar generally, we've already invented the greatest innovations without fully realizing their potential?
I don't understand the question again.
I think you've answered it in your work. Mm-hmm. So, have we already? So, were they called the? I always think Meshuggah is a Jewish thing, but I think they're called the Meshuggah. Were the Aboriginal Central American people? I think that even predated the Mayans and the Aztecs, or they were like the third group that got disease took them out right when the conquistadors came, or right after Columbus in that era of time. Yeah, that's we're using LiDAR right now and discovering like vast kingdoms that probably was the Meshuggah, wherever their people, their kingdoms were.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of that.
And so it's like a lost people. and they invented the wheel as a toy for children, but they never thought to use it for like a wheelbarrow. And I'm thinking, I'm like, I always think, did we do that? Is there something that we just treat as ordinary that in 100 years, but in terms of music, is there something that we've already invented, or it exists, but we don't know quite how to best use it yet?
Big time. I think that everything could be reinvented, but the way that everything is standardized already holds it back from being reinvented. But yeah, there's things could be done in so many different ways, but a lot of the time, because the whole existing framework of hardware is already in one certain way, that forces things to stay in a certain way and of a certain design. But yeah, the guitar is a good example. Like, why does it have 6 strings? Why is it in this frequency range? Like, why didn't it just have 5 strings and be like more of a baritone instrument that became, normalized? And maybe that has to do with our hearing range, our frequency hearing range. But yeah, I think there's...
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Hold that thought.
No problem.
I didn't even think about it. I was like... Some people say that when you order a steak, it's rude to ask for A1. You should only put ketchup on it. Yeah. Do you consider any type of noise suppressor pedal ahead of your fuzz pedals, particularly the high gain ones, to be a slap in your Jext face after all the careful work that you put into making your creations perfect? Put another way, what pedals or sound machines are the ketchup to your steak, and which are the A1 sauce to it? I would assume that you would most want your pedals played without anything else except the instrument and the amp. Incidentally, is there a noise suppressor in the dizzy tone? Because it's so perfectly like...
It gates.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about that circuit that, like, if you're not playing, it gates off.
Yeah.
So, and that, depending on the way everything's dialed in, it can gate more or less or at a more ideal place. I like the noise and everything, and everything. Like when I'm recording, if something's a little hissy, like some people will pull their hair out and go buy devices to get rid of noise and rearrange their power and stuff, but I tend to want that stuff in there. I like the hiss and the 60 cycle hum and so yeah, I think the noise is part of it, but I wouldn't say that everybody should follow that rule. There's been a lot of cool sounds that came about by guys using noise reduction pedals and gate pedals. So really, it's just up to the individual how they want it. If they want it as quiet as possible, then they can try that stuff. But I like the noise.
Rewinding back a number of years, perhaps would it be 27 or so, when 1997 did you build your studio?
97, yeah, we started Rust Belt in 97 and built it out in the form that it's close to in 98.
Oh, it's coming from over there.
Yeah.
You built it, you started in 97, it was finished in 98.
Mm-hmm. Top of 99 was when we were like open for business.
And you yourself, like, it's not like you had someone else build it, like you...
It was just Al Sutton and I got a loan from my dad, and we bought like $14,000 worth of plywood and drywall and tried to get our carpenter friends to come work by promising them to have recording time in the future. And so yeah, that's when we did that.
Well, I would absolutely love to learn woodworking myself. I own a table saw. I own all these different hand tools. And there's one thing that's kept me, 10 things that have kept me from starting woodworking my fingers, because everything, I come to think of it, everything I love to do in life, I do with my hands. I'm like, if I lost a finger, that would be a big loss. What is it? Half the strength of your hand is in your pinky, for instance, if you lost your pinky.
Oh, wow.
And so, but as a builder, or a carpenter, the phrase is, if it looks good, it is good. There's no such thing as a perfectly square room. There's always going to be little variances here and there. And I suppose the same thing would go with music. Like you were saying about, it might not be to your taste, but if it sounds good, if the end product is something that's...
Yeah. Well, you got to use your ears. And a lot of the times your mind is getting in the way. And there was a big learning curve with going into Pro Tools where you're staring at a screen all the time. It's very hard to keep your mind out of the equation when you're using your eyes and not your ears. So when you're staring at a screen, a lot of people go through this where you'll go through years of going too much into the screen and too much into the visual, and you'll start going into the waveforms and moving things around and obsessing over things being perfectly on this line. And I don't think that stuff for my material adds anything to the equation. So I've really had the desire to minimize how long I'm looking at the screen and how much I'm looking at the screen and for what purposes I'm looking at the screen. I try to keep the screen as just the multi-track. Of course, it goes farther than that now because once you've opened up that rabbit hole, you tend to start leaning on it for certain things. Like if things don't sound right, then you're going to try some plugins or something. But for the most part, I try to stay away from plugins. I try to use the screen only as like a visual multi-track so that it's just faders and pans. And then I try to keep everything else in the analog domain.
Does Jext, one of the original circuits for the Super Fuzz pedal, has Jext as one of the Super Fuzz offshoots?
Oh yeah, that's just like an OEM, I call them. That's when the manufacturer makes the same product for themselves, but they let another company plaster their name on it. So Jext is just Shin OEMs the stuff for whoever Jext was, which could have been Montgomery Ward. Or,
really?
There was a lot of pedals made for Sears and Montgomery Ward that have a lot of weird names like Jext,
I was just going to say, any connection to Jext in Jext or no?
None at all? No. The Jext Telez is in the movie Fantastic Planet, which is a 1973 cartoon that was made in France and Czechoslovakia, that it was called at the time. And it's just a cartoon movie that's really tripped out that I watch like all the time. And Jext and Telez were two names of two like continents on the planet. And I just, really I was searching for a name that would be very singular and nothing else could be confused for it. So two completely made up words put right next to each other was just the answer. Because in New York, I was in New York City and I had a band and we stupidly decided to call it Downtown. It was like the worst thing you could possibly call a band in New York City, to just never have anybody understand that it was even a band that was listed on on the, the billboard or whatever. So from that lesson came Jext Telez, because I was like, okay, this is my next big, I need a name thing in life, and I'm going to go with something that is completely made up words that you can't confuse it.
John Paul Jones, the cantankerous bassist for Led Zeppelin, I still root for him. Like him and Bonzo are my two favorites. But I just heard the other day, one time, what's his name? Robert Plant was consulting him about, he's like, what do you think about this lyric? He's like, to be honest, I never really pay attention to what you say. And they kind of had a thing after that with each other. But John Paul Jones, back in the MySpace era, or I guess people might not know, the early aughts, the early 2000s, he had a MySpace page. He had a new solo act or new band. And I always remember the interview he did. He's like, what I hate about the internet is you can't name anything anymore, because it's all been taken. He's like, I forget what name he would have done, like the Submarines, but it would have been something like related to Led Zeppelin, but kind of off. And some stupid band in Albuquerque or something had it already. And he's like, all the good names are taken, but that's a strong name, Jext Telez.
Yeah. There's some more continents on that planet in that movie that I've been starting to try to catch. What was that? What was that? In case I need another sub name someday. But I think I got the two cool sounding ones. I like how it rolled off the tongue too.
Yeah.
It seems to mean something even though it doesn't.
Yeah. And when I prima facie, for me, I inferred almost a Spanish origin, but you said what is it, French and Czechoslovakian?
Yeah,
not Spanish at all.
Yeah, I think crazy. The original novelist, because it was called like Oms en Série, so the original science fiction novel was a French writer.
Man.
Yeah.
So like, what's his name? Seinfeld. Wait, check my here's a Seinfeld. What's the deal? What's the deal with all these pedal clones? Is that good, bad, or neutral to the furtherance of good tone, regardless of its age and previous use? Ought a pedal clone improve the original design that it copies, or at least offer switching or dialing between the classic sound and a new take on the same? What are the rules to pedal cloning if you were to set some ethical boundaries? Folks cloning your pedals undercuts your business, almost like you think bootlegs to, it's funny, John Lennon was okay with bootlegs of his music, but like everyone else kind of wasn't. Like, famously, who is it? There's that video of Neil Young going to a record store in the 70s in New York City and taking all of his bootlegs off and actually calling the owner of the record shop. He's like, can I speak to the owner? And you can see it on YouTube. He's like, I don't much appreciate what you're doing. I'm Neil Young. And he's got that, that voice. He's like, okay, have it. And he walks off with the records. But what are the ethics of pedal cloning?
Well, I think I'm way more like John Lennon than Neil Young. Just like I saw that there was a kid out there doing clones of all the Jext Telez stuff, and I thought, oh, that's fantastic, because it's never going to be the real deal for people that want the real deal, but it keeps the perception alive out there while I'm taking 2 years off, and then people see, oh, this is a clone of this thing, so it establishes you as the genuine article. And without it, you're just that you don't even have that comparison going on.
It's funny you say that, the genuine article, the real McCoy, the real McCaw, which actually is a Michigan origin, a man named McCoy. They say of bank tellers, how can you spot a counterfeit? Study the real thing. And as we said earlier, res loquitur ipsa, the thing speaks for itself. Even, I'm so honored, all the superlatives, that you would sit down here with me and have this conversation. And at the beginning of our conversation, I said, you don't even need to have it. Your work speaks for itself. Just listen. And like you said, the clones versus the real thing, the Pepsi challenge. And actually, I would love that be up to you, but for you to take the Pepsi challenge between the Jext and then what you based it off of. Could you do a blind test and tell between the two?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's our goal when we were making them, and still are making some of them, is that you can't tell the difference. And that was really maybe part of our success, was being so crazy about getting it right. So we would really take a lot of time, like extra months, and when we were designing things, and like the whole using your ears thing, like it's either you've got it or you don't, and you can't let your mind come into it and start fooling you that, oh, this is good enough or close enough. You really have to be able to A/B and not be able to pick the two, and that's something that's really hard to get to. That degree of exact sameness between things, but yeah, I think part of our success was definitely that we worked really hard to get it right, so that you could have a vintage dizzy tone or our dizzy tone, and they would both do essentially the same thing.
Who is your number one all-time band favorite of, that you?
I guess number one would be Pink Floyd.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like most influential, and who have I listened to the most, it would probably be Pink Floyd. But when I was younger, it was like Rush, and then before that it was ELO. So you kind of go through different, I never really wanted to make music like Rush. I think I was more into the musicianship of it. But and ELO, I don't really want to make the pop sort of Roy Orbison-esque songs that they make either. But Pink Floyd was like, yeah, this is what I want to make. So if there was anything that I use as like I actually want to make music just like this music, it's Pink Floyd. But if you set out to exactly clone something music, it never even comes close. That's part of the wonder of rock and roll, and like just how unique each different output is from each band. There's just too many variables to be able to sound exactly like them. But definitely, like, if I had to just pick one and say this is what I'm trying to sound like, it would be, elements of Pink Floyd.
All those bands you named were known, famous, infamous for, being studio-bound bands, lock themselves in and just make masterworks.
Yeah, and that's what I want.
I thought you were going to say the Beatles.
Oh, well, yeah, they're like a thread throughout, and there has been times when I was very specifically going after their tones. The Beatles, to me, wasn't like I want to write songs like this. It was like I want my drums to sound like Ringo's, and I think that happens a lot to people, because when you grew up on these records from birth to 6 years old, those tones are like locked in your mind in ways that you're never going to get them out. And so yeah, I mean, I still reference the Ringo Beatle drum tone, Paul's bass tone, like on Sgt. Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour, were amazing. a lot of sounds on the White Album are still like that's the definition of the sound to me, you know. And yeah, Abbey Road, that's like a really, really great sounding analog album. And yeah, those records still have a lot to do with where I'm trying to go, like as far as the overall picture and the overall textural composition, like should perform audibly, sonically like Abbey Road, you know, like the equalization of the record, the warmness of the tones, the puffiness and the poofiness, and the impact of the kick drum, and like the snap of the snare. Like you could take all the stuff that on Abbey Road and just use that as your ruler for how things should be. But that's like, once again, I'm not making a rule for other people. That's just how I got caught up in it. Has to be this way. And because those, in a sense of being an aesthetic, like an addicted to aesthetics type of a person, I definitely am. And those are the aesthetics right there of tone on those Beatles records.
I'm not sure how you'd evaluate. I'm still going. I always gotta do my stupid checks just because. I'm not sure how you would evaluate your present recording setup, how pleased you are with it. But you're win the lottery, no expense spared, studio, maybe shorthand, maybe you'd have a 1-to-1 for Abbey Road, but maybe put more time in, you take aspects I would assume of the studios that your favorite bands, what they used. What would your dream studio be, and then who would you want to use it besides yourself, and for what?
Well, I've been spoiled in that I've gotten so much time and resources to be able to explore that, because that's like a very important thing. So basically, the way I have it right now is the way I want it.
Wow. There's
nothing different that I would do.
Yeah.
And who I would want to use it, it's just me.
Yeah. After you die, no. Whoever, doesn't matter. All right. It sounds like Nicolas Cage, to get around his bankruptcies. Some stupid law in New Orleans. He's got like the most ostentatious mausoleum, because he could just like pour money into it and not worry about it. But sort of like, this is mine. No one else gets to enjoy it after he dies.
Yeah, I guess if you're into cemeteries.
Memento mori, remember your death.
Yeah.
But would you ever design and sell? Because you've done pedals. You've done that's so amazing. The Wolf Box. Would you ever design and sell a guitar amp, a bass amp, a PA, and a Busker's Ultimate battery-powered speaker? Would you do any or all of these?
Wait, what were those again?
A guitar amp, a bass amp, a PA, or even like a busking battery-powered kind of portable.
I would never be able to compete with what's coming out of China, like on those battery-powered portable PAs. I mean, that's something that is amazing to me right now, that like even out here in this silo I brought like a $29 karaoke PA that I bought for one of my daughters for Christmas or something, and they weren't using it, so I was bringing it out here and Bluetoothing sounds out of my phone into this silo and then re-recording them. So I mean, that 20 years ago was like, the only way to get any sound out here would have been to run power, and there's no power. So yeah, you can do a lot with those Buskers PAs now, man. And I think people should take advantage. You know, you can record anywhere you want, like under bridges and in really cool ambient spaces. Go out and find those spaces, you know. And
What about the Dumble or the Diaz? I guess you have to have a D name to get into the business, but you
for
have a
guitar amps,
yeah. Would you ever make an amp?
that's a little too involved for my, like, fuzz pedal is about the maximum complexity.
So I was doing research. John Deacon, 1973, Queen. They play a show, and they're a big band. God bless them. The roadie doesn't pack away the Dallas Rangemaster. He leaves it on the stage. Come to the next show. Brian May's like, "Where's the Rangemaster?" He's like, "I didn't think it was that important." He's like, "Are you kidding me?" So
Who said that?
The roadie.
Oh, wow.
And I'll find. I'll send it to you.
I didn't think it was that important.
And the John Deacon, because he started to be an electrical engineer prior to Queen, so a couple of transistors is not a big deal for him. Just quickly made a silicone version of the Rangemaster, and then later Pete Cornish made him for the rest of the time for him.
Yeah.
And so why am I saying all this? There's a reason. Silicone fuzz, Dallas Rangemaster, adapting the change. I don't remember, but it's a good piece of trivia, nonetheless. No, we were talking about something, and I don't remember.
Battery powered
PAs.
PAs.
The simplicity of it. It was a simple thing. He was an electrical engineer, just a couple of transistors. So how much of a learning curve would it be for you to get into the amp game, or where would you put yourself on the, rate yourself as a maker of things?
Oh, I rate it no skills whatsoever. Like, I have no electronic engineering skills whatsoever, and if not for other people doing that part of it, there would be no Jext Telez at all.
Really?
Yeah, like I have no desire to want that knowledge, and so it was just completely depending on other people, Al Sutton and Colin Simon, to do all that kind of electronic engineering aspect of it. But I mean, making pedals is pretty easy. Like, all the schematics are posted online, so you just go, I need these resistors, I need these transistors, I need these capacitors, and then some way to put it all together, which is a board, which you can go buy boards now too, pre-made, of any pedal you want. Like, you could, if you've got a little bit of soldering skills, well, that's the thing, is like the soldering technique really ends up being a big part of it, because if you don't know what you're doing, you'll just have a pedal that's just intermittent and janky for its whole life if you burn the solder off of the board and it's lifted up or something. So yeah, you need I don't have any of those skills. I can't solder for shit, and I couldn't tell you how to take a fluke meter out and measure this and that and what it equals. I just had good marketing skills, and like sonic ideas and what would be cool, and then so I had good organizational skills to like hire people to make this stuff.
Yeah. 1 second. I have a good sense of time. Sorry, I'm 10 seconds out. Do you have a good internal clock? I heard that at least with welding, it's a lot about the speed that you do it too, because you're melting something as you're going along. You're
Yeah, those are amazing skills that take time to develop, and I don't have the patience, let alone like I don't want a stream of chemicals like going off near me. Yeah, it seems really unhealthy. And it seems like, I mean, it's an inside joke, but it seems like most guys that work on guitar amps for a living end up being kind of kooky. And I wonder if it's tied to that lead thing in their face.
Mad as a Hatter, kind of a
Yeah.
modern take.
Yeah, too many years of inhaling lead and rosin, whatever rosin is. Yeah, I don't have the patience for it either. And there's some things I can do with my hands, and then there's some things I can't. Like, I can't draw at all, like very well at all. And also with soldering things, I'm just not good at little tiny, like, focused pinpoints of. I'm better at, like, big general, like, oh, I'll play this chord, you know. It's got to be a couple inches big for me to focus on it.
Axe, not a scalpel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who is your music machine maker hero? Pete Cornish, Cesar Diaz, Alexander Dumble, someone unknown to us that you knew and loved? To budding builders of tomorrow, who would you recommend to look up and emulate?
For making electronics, I don't think I really like treat those people as heroes in my architectural head, but I mean, I can give you a list of gear that blows my mind, which is like Neumann microphones, not the new stuff, but the old stuff. AKG microphones from the late 50s and early 60s, and mic preamps from the 60s, usually from England, like Trident and Helios, and compressors. Usually this is all vintage stuff, usually, you know. I don't really have one figurehead like some people would say Rupert Neve or something. I don't really have like a built-up iconology going on the gear stuff.
It's funny that your heroes in music were legends in the studio. You went to become a great studio workman yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And also with music or audio, the things that you most enjoyed or enjoy come from great companies, not quite individuals. And
Yeah.
Same with Jext Telez. It's a group. It's not so much one person. It's the teamwork that makes the kind of 1 + 1 = 3, or I guess 1 + 1 + 1 = 4, or however you do that math.
Yeah. Well, I like as far as hero worship, I get more into the engineers of records and the guys that dial the tones up. So like all the Abbey Road people that did all the Beatles and Floyd albums, and that's like just using the gear that's already there, you know, and then using your ears to drive the sound into a certain place. So I'm into mixers and engineers, more so, but like Ken Townsend worked at Trident Studios. Is that his name? I can't remember. I don't know. I guess maybe I should be more focused on the individuals, but I'm not.
Yeah. Well, whatever you're doing, it's working out for you. Sans Germanium, your pedal's brand signature sort of sound is lost. What adds to the germanium that is besides the germanium itself, if anything at all? Or is it the germanium, or is germanium far above all else going on within a pedal? Like, are there other elements that are important to the gizmos and gadgets that you've made besides these new old stock transistors? Or are there other
Yeah, to some degree the caps and the resistors have an effect on the tone. Like the old carbon comp resistors sound better to me, and some of the capacitors sound better. The other thing besides germanium, which is just really in fuzz pedals and a few mic pre's, is the transformers has the biggest impact on what my ear grasps, because the input transformer on a mic preamp has the biggest effect on the tone of what you're gonna get at the end of making your song or your record. It's that mic preamps input transformer. Those are like the holy grail things, the items. Like if you take an old Helios or an old Trident mic preamp and you take out that ZUT, it's called a ZUT transformer, and replace it with anything else, then it's not really a Trident sound anymore. And so there's just that one part that really affects so much of the sound. The input transformer on a mic pre.
Now, are these things that, just like germanium, are in low supply or not even made anymore, or the same way that they were at their height?
Well, some people are starting to remake them, these transformers. I don't think people will be able to remake germanium. I think that's long gone.
Wait, are you, like physically, like there's a scarcity of the element itself?
No, just the machinery and the knowledge that it took to create those particular pieces of germanium is all long gone.
Kind of like how they can't rebuild. There are welding techniques that were invented for the Apollo rockets that they always had to have a copy on the Earth in case anything went wrong. But they worked so fast because trying to beat the Russians, they didn't write everything down. So even though they have a copy, they don't even know all the things. They don't even know how to do it again.
Yeah.
Similar thing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of knowledge and skill that are lost to the ages, and that'd be a good example. But it could be redone if it was if it had to be redone. Mankind could go back after, like, why doesn't OC44 black glass transistor from Mullard beat all others in a Rangemaster? And we need to make these again. And some people have tried to remake them, but they don't have the same quality. And I don't know why, if it's the quality of the germanium or the manufacturing, but these input transformers can be remade. Al Sutton at Acme Audio is remaking a couple of them now and can nail that exact same sound. But that's a little bit of a bigger physical item in winding wire around a specific metal composition. And so some of this stuff can be redone, and if it's profitable, people will go after it. But some of it is, I think, lost to the ages.
Man. So would you consider certain germanium to be like Stradivarius?
Oh, for sure.
People are gonna shoot for it, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that anybody's making germanium anymore. I suppose maybe there's some being made for some flat screen TVs or something, but it's probably not germanium in there anymore. Yeah, there's Holy Grail germanium.
That's fine.
And that's part of, like, making cool fuzz pedals is finding that stuff. And that was a huge part of Jext Telez's success, was me being obsessive and digging through the marketplace and finding that the specific types and pieces and varieties of germanium. But that stuff's getting pretty dried up now. It's not like, if I had to redo the whole Jext Telez years of functionality, the higher functionality years, I would be screwed because I wouldn't be able to find the stuff that I had already dug out and found and then used in the product. That it's just not there anymore.
Wow. Keeping to germanium, and I'm just curious about this. The Maestro fuzz was made in Kalamazoo. Well, it was at least marked Kalamazoo, Michigan. Gibson, Kalamazoo.
Yeah.
Is there any family connection, or any of you guys in Jext Telez to the Gibson Maestro fuzz?
No.
Because keep it in the family, family business.
In
of fuzz.
state, yeah. No.
Since fuzz began in Michigan, in a sense, one sense of fuzz.
Right.
Do you feel any lineage and legacy is being upheld by yourself and company in Jext Telez?
No, not really.
How do you maintain the past, and how do you plunge forward into the future?
You plunge forward into the future by using the gear of the past.
Yeah. Well, that sounds simple and laughable, but too often people don't learn from history and they make the mistakes, and you're saying yes and instead of what's this, and then figuring out from nothing.
Yeah. Use vintage gear. It's better.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. About the Stradivarius. Yeah. I heard this awful quote. Speaking of vintage, what you just said about vintage gear. A lot of vintage guitars are just pieces of wood. They're old pieces of wood. But a Stradivarius is always going to be a Stradivarius. But the early Les Pauls, like the late 50s, early 60s ones, used, at the time, 100-year-old Brazilian wood. I forget what kind, rosewood. And so it already was older wood, and I guess older, drier, more resonant, louder, so better sound off the bat. Would you consider, and maybe they didn't know quite just how good they had it or were giving it to the people at the time. Do you think a similar thing was at play in the late 50s, early 60s, kind of when all these effects came around and started? They didn't know how good they had it, and they're just kind of dropping dimes, dropping perfection, like you with your company, just throwing out, gold nuggets and out into the world.
Do I think they knew that they were making like $250,000 guitars when they were making like 59 Les Pauls? I don't know. I really don't know. I think they probably knew that the wood they were getting was special and wouldn't always be there. Because, when you're getting like 400-year-old trees, and those trees are going to be depleted. I don't know to what degree they thought, those would be the Stradivariuses of guitars.
Yeah. And thus and so with effects. To close off, wisdom for the folks at home. Any wisdom you can impart on the people?
Here's the wisdom. Here's the best guitar chord. Just put your finger all the way straight across. But I do it by thumb on top, and then I kind of mute the 5th string, but these are the best guitar chords, and it's something that's really not on your radar a lot of the time. So see, that's just all the way straight across there. I think that registers as like a minor 7th or something. So that's the wisdom for all you guitar players. Just integrate all the way across, straight across. But it's hard. You can't really play it like this, because then you have this problem 5th string, because really it would have to be like this. But you can play it without that string. I'm obsessed with that.
Well, I think of she's a lady. She played at Woodstock. She's an acoustic artist, blonde hair. She just got a Kennedy Award a few years ago, last year. What's her name? She's from Canada. She paints. She quit music to paint.
Sarah McLachlan?
No, late 60s. She played at Woodstock. Blonde hair, long blonde hair, acoustic. I think her and Dylan played.
Yeah, I know the girl you're talking about.
She's from Canada.
I can't remember her name.
But she taught herself how to play guitar because she was sick as a kid, and didn't know any better, so had like unique tuning. I'm like, it's so cool, you know, like just whatever works for you.
Yeah. I love different tunings too. Like, I like just twisting them until it's doing something weird, and then just use that in the studio, and then never again be able to figure out what I had the guitar tuned like. But yeah, these are great. One of my buddies showed them to me like 20 years ago. Just the straight across chords. And we did a piece in the studio, and like it really got stuck in my head in the long run of like using those. Because it doesn't take a whole lot of technique to just use that, you know, not a lot of skill involved in playing that straight across. But to me, those are really great chords, and I've been exploring that for a few years now. And also, like, when you're songwriting, like, you don't always need like 4 chords or sets of chords. Like 2 chords is enough really to make a lot of the coolest songs. Like, you could just, like, A minor to D is a good one. Like, if you just keep exploring that, like in the studio, I'll just take 2 chords and I'll just lay it down for like 6 minutes, and then see where your melodies develop for you, and then it'll kind of write itself. Even though you don't have a whole song written, you just start off with those 2 chords. Lay that down like that for like 5 minutes, and then, you know, change instruments or something, or play some drums to it, and like the songs will just start to kind of write themselves.
Is it harder to get the second chord because it says something about the first one, or it goes somewhere from the first one, or you just whatever the 2 chords and you just go from there?
Well, no, it could. Yeah, I mean, any 2 chords you can. If you want to make it weird, you know, you do them in distances that are a little bit weirder, like let's see, G, and then what would be just weird that most people wouldn't go from there would be like that's not really working that well, but.
I imagine a silent movie. No, honestly, like that the mood change, like someone walks into the room right then and there, you know, or yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the fun thing about 2 chords will produce all the, you know, whichever drama you want. You can get it out of 2 chords.
Well, about a decade ago, one of my many regrets in life, I turned down playing bass for Michigan's premier Jimi Hendrix impersonator, Lemon James, literally. And I joked she was peace in the Middle East because her first and last name had Jewish and Arabic origins, like, you know, all in one. No, but I turned down playing for her because I had a buddy who was a better bass player than me. He's like, don't do it, Ryan. you're going to be so bored. Every Jimi Hendrix song is just 2 chords. And you're going to be staying up there for 3 hours playing one chord and then the other chord and then back to the one, you know.
Right.
You're going to be bored out of your mind. And I wish I would have done it.
Yeah,
Because there's so much, it might be simple, but then you do all the other things, you know, while you're hanging out in those 2 chords, like you said.
Yeah. Well, I still get caught up in trying to make like big 4 or 6 or 8 chord compositions. And when you get to the end of the whole path in the studio where you've created a song out of what initially was just you trying to come up with 4 or 6 chords, most of the time, like if you just use 2 chords, that song has become way more epic than the 4 and the 6 and the 8 chord songs tend to kind of shut you into a corner more. Whereas the 2 or even 1 just allows you to get inside of a key and explore way more. Whereas when you're using 4 chords, like the key is shifting around too much and you're really kind of painted into a corner more on the possibilities if you're trying to leave it all open.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mr. E.
Definitely.
And leave us with a little Git fiddle playing, and then we'll call it a day.